Okay, as I said on Rosh Hashanah, it's perfectly okay to let people in anytime during the sermon. Perfectly fine, just don't let anybody out. So I'm going to begin with a question. What one-liner in Jewish life would you identify as the mantra of the Jewish people? That which defines our most fundamental beliefs and is known to pretty much every Jew. It's a prayer, but it's also a statement. It's said in the morning and in the evening. A Jew who believes his life is coming to an end will recite this mantra, this declaration of faith. I think that most of you, most every Jew, would say the Jewish mantra, the Jewish declaration of faith is Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O people of Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Or, there is only one God. So Abraham introduced this monotheistic idea to the world, the idea that there is one creator who created all of humanity in his image and breathed into him an eternal soul. The other thing that monotheism introduced to the world is the idea that since there is one God, there is one ultimate morality, one ultimate ethic, that there is such a thing as right and wrong. And a great majority of humanity has bought into this idea of one God, one morality. And there's no doubt that it has brought more justice, fairness, and hope than any other idea in all of human history. Now, I'm not suggesting it shouldn't be our Jewish motto anymore. What I'd like to suggest to you is a new additional mantra for the Jewish people, one that fits the reality of our 21st century, one that I believe is critical to our ability to survive as a nation. It's not directed to the outside world. It's a mantra, a statement that is directed inwardly. It's for us. And the mantra is this: our critiques of Israel dare not be louder than our expressions of love. Our critiques of Israel dare never be louder than our expressions of love. It was said by Rabbi Stuart Weinblatt, founder of the Zionist Rabbis Coalition. Even that's strange. I need to have a coalition of Zionist rabbis? Shouldn't it be like all the rabbis? No, in the 21st century, we actually needed to create Zionist Rabbis Coalition. Now, Israel's not beyond criticism. No country is, no community is, no family is, and the Torah obligates us to speak up when we find that something is wrong. Hocheach tochiach amitecha. Rebuke your neighbor when you see wrongdoing. But notice what it says: rebuke your neighbor, your friend. The key is that the one you are rebuking must also have felt first your concern and your love. They must know that you deeply care about him, that you see her as your neighbor or your kin. Otherwise, he won't hear the rebuke. He won't accept the criticism. We rebuke Iran over its treatment of women. We rebuke Iran over its support of terror all over the world, and many other human rights violations. Do you think they care one iota what we say or think? We're not friends. We're not family. We're not allies with Iran. We're adversaries. They don't care about our rebuke or criticism. unless it's backed up with actions that are harmful to them. We can criticize family and close friends because, as hard as it is to hear, as upsetting as it may be, they know it comes out of love and it comes out of concern. But if our critiques are louder than our expressions of love, they don't hear us. They tune out. Last year, when Israel was being bombarded by hundreds upon hundreds of missiles from Gaza, when Israelis were running for bomb shelters, when children were sleeping every night in bomb shelters, shaking in their beds, fearful to go to school, afraid to go outside to play, Israel responded strongly to try and put a stop to the missiles. Missiles that were launched from Gaza, directed at civilian targets in Israel. Now, some thought Israel's response was too strong, or that she wasn't careful enough in her efforts to not harm civilians. But here is the undisputable fact. Israel does more than any army in the world now or has ever done to minimize civilian casualties when responding to attacks. Now, some don't think it's enough. It's a disagreement. I understand. I think the critics are wrong. But remember this well, that the critics outside the family of true friends of Israel, they don't want to see an improved and better Israel. It isn't that they just want an Israel that will absorb attacks without responding, or critics who are silent when terrorists launch missiles at Israel, at her civilians, but are apoplectic when Israel responds and civilians are unintentionally killed or injured. No, these critics of Israel do not want an improved Israel. They want there to be no Israel. Not an improved Jewish state, they want no Jewish state. Just like the Palestinian leadership and all the terror organizations, along with Iran, they don't want peace with Israel. They want peace without an Israel. They don't want a sovereign Palestinian state next to the Jewish state. They want a sovereign Palestinian state in place of the Jewish state. So when a group of 100 rabbinical students from non-Orthodox rabbinical schools published a letter for the world to see, expressing their deep disappointment and their criticism of Israel for the way she responded to that wave of missile and terrorist attacks, it was very painful for Israelis and for those who love Israel to read and to understand. Not because those rabbinical students disagreed with Israel's methods of defense, but because nowhere in the public letter was there a single mention of the pain being inflicted on the Israeli population by the missiles. Not one expression of sympathy for Israelis killed in those missile attacks. No understanding of the fear that was gripping the entire country. There was no empathy, no identification with what happens. What happens when a siren goes off and you have 15 seconds to find shelter, and you have children in one room and an elderly parent in the other room, and you don't know what to do. There was no expression of concern from those rabbis to be for the Israeli people. None. Their criticism of Israel was louder, much louder than their expressions of love. In fact, there was no love. There was no empathy. The empathy was only for the Gazans, and the critique was only for Israel. That letter was used by every group dedicated to eradicating Israel off the face of the earth as proof of how evil Israel is. It was great propaganda for Israel's mortal enemies, provided by those who are supposed to be our future rabbis. It was a shocking moment an eye-opening happening in American Jewish communal life. It said to us, Jerusalem, American Jewish community, we have a problem. And it's an internal one, much more than an external one. This past April, 850 members of the Miami Jewish community went to Israel to celebrate her 75th birthday. Thousands of others were there from all over the world. But I want to say proudly, Miami had by far the largest delegation. Beth Torah sent not one, but 2 buses, and a shout out to our own Barbara Black-Goldfarb, who is one of the co-chairs of the mission. It was exactly. It was an outstanding mission, but that's not my point. My point is that many, if not most of those on the mission, have very serious concerns about the debate in Israel today over judicial reform and a religious extremism that's part of the governing coalition of Israel now. And those concerns were conveyed to the Israeli government and to political leaders throughout the country. The criticism of the right-wing coalition's judicial reform plans, it's profound and it's deep. The people on that mission, just like you and me and most of American Jewry, are deeply worried. We're concerned about what such reforms could mean for democracy in Israel, for the balance of power between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. But we all went to Israel. We didn't boycott, because you don't boycott your family over a disagreement. Instead, you go and you talk with them. You show up to their birthday party. And that's exactly what the mission did. And you sing, and you dance, and you celebrate that birthday. The day before the birthday was Israel Memorial Day, for the soldiers and victims of terror. Over 28,000 have fallen. Over 28,000 since 1948. It's a very tiny country. 28,000 is a very big number. There isn't a family in Israel which hasn't experienced the loss of a relative or a close friend over these decades. We joined in the memorial services and we mourned the victims and we listened to some of their stories. They were part of our Jewish family and we paid proper respect. We cried with our family there in Israel. Some of the victims of terror were fellow Americans killed by terrorists. Some of the soldiers were Americans who made Aliyah and joined the Israeli army. American Jews and Israel are family and close friends. We celebrate and we mourn with each other. But we aren't and need not be silent where there is a disagreement in the family, because we love our family and we want to see it move in the right and best direction. So yes, we criticized, we gave advice, but the Israelis knew this of us. Our expressions of love are always louder than our criticisms. What they don't know, and it concerns them deeply, if that is true for the future rabbis who wrote that public letter of attack without a morsel of empathy or love. They don't know if it's true of the future Jewish leadership, which is now studying in the centers of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism in the United States, the American college campus. Children first learn to love and admire their parents. It gives them a sense of belonging and purpose. It gives them a sense of pride, a sense of being loved in return. With that as their foundation, they can later deal with the reality, well, after all, we're imperfect human beings. That we as parents, we weren't perfect, but our love for them, it was perfect. So our mistakes and our foibles are forgivable. And so too with Israel. We teach the children to love Israel, and then they come to learn that Israel's not superhuman, but a country whose rebirth was miraculous, without precedent in all of human history, but not perfect, not without her blemishes and her foibles, but a country that contributes mightily to the betterment of all of humanity, a country that has made huge strides in protecting minorities, and a country where all religious institutions are protected and have autonomy. When our children or our relatives and friends are engaged in a behavior that we believe is self-destructive, we say, I love you, but I don't love what you're doing right now. I don't love what you're saying, and I'm worried it will harm you. It'll be something you will deeply regret. Imagine the damage we would do to our children if from early on we mainly taught them or showed them how we had so many faults, we were so mistaken, we were so flawed. They would be without role models, no one to emulate, no goals to reach for. I was sitting with some colleagues, and our discussion was focused on the reports that the attachment to Israel and the love of Israel has seriously been weakened in the next generation. And every rabbi was bemoaning that very sad thought. One rabbi finally asked, how could this have happened? What's going on? Well, I guess I couldn't control myself anymore. Maybe the older I get, the shorter my fuse is. So I responded with this. I've read your high holiday sermons over the years. Many are really inspiring and outstanding. I've stolen some good material from there. But your sermons on Israel are all criticism, all designed to expose Israel's weaknesses, and almost always far more critical of Israel than of the terrorist organizations and the countries like Iran, dedicated to her destruction, willing to use any terror tactic to kill her citizens. There was tremendous disappointment in your sermons, even a sense of betrayal in your words in those sermons, that Israel somehow had betrayed you because it couldn't live up to your high ideals. Ideals formed where? Ideals formed here in America, without missiles flying over your heads, without having to race to a bomb shelter to save yourself, maybe your kids, maybe an elderly parent, maybe your spouse. Ideals formed without having seen buses and restaurants blown up with dozens of innocent men and women and children, either dead or mutilated for life. Opinions formed without having to kiss your child goodbye on the day he or she enlisted into the Israeli army. Ideals formed in a vacuum, in an alternative reality from what Israelis live every single day. These kids come home from college to be in their shul, with their family, with their rabbi, and year after year they hear Israel being slammed and critiqued in your sermons, more than any other nation in the world. And it's from that, you, their own rabbi. And you ask me how this happened, I said? Take a look at your sermons. Reread them. Then look in the mirror and ask the question, how did this happen? Part of the answer is in that mirror. Now, what I will tell you now is really inconceivable to me. It's inconceivable, but it just happened. It happened on Friday. Today's Sunday. It happened on Friday. Some conservative Reform rabbis went to protest against Israel in front of the United Nations. They claim it's directed against Israel's prime minister, Netanyahu, because of his government's support for judicial reform that has clearly divided the Israeli people and the Jewish world. Do they not know that this protest will be seen by Israel's enemies as an attack against Israel by American Jewry? That's how it's going to be reported throughout the entire world. My God. In front of the United Nations, that unholy, disgraceful, hypocritical, virulently anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic body, where countries like Syria and China get to sit on the Human Rights Commission? Rabbis protesting in front of the United Nations? If you protest in the United Nations, you protest against the UN. You don't protest against Israel. I know that they think they're being moral. I understand in their hearts they think they're being moral, but sometimes you could be a moral idiot. You want to protest Netanyahu and send him a message? Okay, go to the Israeli embassy. Go to the consulate. Maybe go to his hotel. But you don't go to the central locus of hatred for Israel, where Israel is condemned by the General Assembly and other UN bodies more frequently than any other nation in the world, all of them combined. How dare those rabbis protest in front of the UN? Shame on them. Shame on them. You have heard my Israel sermons and Rabbi Roisman's over the years. The college kids have heard them or read them. I'm told that some of them Zoom into our services from school to hear those sermons. My goal, my job, my sacred obligation is to make sure that we love Israel first, that we love her deeply, that we are profoundly proud of her, so that when it does come time to critique her, we all know it's an act of love and not of abandonment. And so when I tell you, yes, I am deeply concerned about the proposed judicial reform in Israel, as the Israelis are themselves. Look at the demonstrations. Unprecedented numbers. And you know that I'm upset and I'm worried that the ultra-religious have schools with almost no math, science, no computer skills, no English. It'll be a disaster for Israel to have a population uneducated. And I'm upset that the Israeli police have not cracked down seriously on Jewish vigilantes who've terrorized Arabs on the West Bank. They burned cars, fields, some homes. It's retaliation, vigilante style, for attacks on Jews there. You can hear that criticism and still love and stand by Israel because your rabbis, your parents, your grandparents, the little blue box that we put the nickels and dimes in to plant trees, because they taught you to love and be proud of Israel first. And as Rabbi Roisman reminded us on Rosh Hashanah, Israel is the only place always open to Jews in danger and Jews who want to live their lives in our ancient and modern homeland. And you can listen to those criticisms because you have heard of the incredible accomplishments of Israel for all of humanity and her willingness to share her advancements in medicine and science and computers and agriculture with all of humanity, even with her enemies. You have heard the good and the great, and you've heard the bad and the ugly, but always, always our expression of love was louder than our words of criticism. And so I return to my opening mantra. To me, it is as important as saying the Shema every day. In fact, it is the new Shema of the Jewish people. Our critiques of Israel dare not be louder than our expressions of love. If not, we strengthen those whose critiques of Israel are not meant to strengthen her, but are meant as a tool to destroy her. Our enemies do not want a more democratic Israel. They want no Israel. Before saying a word about Israel, before offering legitimate and helpful critiques, remember this. You want a better Israel. So do the Israelis themselves. But their enemies want no Jewish state at all. And we dare not give them the fodder and the ammunition to accomplish their sinister goal. On Sunday, December 4th, here at Beth Torah, there will be an educational program about anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism and they're the same, on the college campus, and how we can prepare for it and how we can confront it. It'll be sponsored by the Harold Simon Foundation and presented by Cherut, a Zionist educational nonprofit organization. We need to be educated. We need to be trained to actively support Israel and prepare our college students for the anti-Zionist propaganda they will encounter on many of our nation's great college campuses. So the Shema is our first mantra. Say it together. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And what is the first word of the paragraph after the Shema? V'ahavta, and you shall love. Shema Yisrael leads to love. Love of God, love of Torah, love of humanity, love of the Jewish people, and love of the Jewish state. And then in the third paragraph, the Shema, after the love is expressed, there's a critique of the people of Israel. And so, I ask you to not just live by the mantra of the Shema, to not only teach the Shema to your children and grandchildren, but to live by this and to say this to them. Our criticisms of Israel will never, ever be louder than our expressions of love for her and her people. So take the bookmark with this saying we have provided. Put it on your refrigerators. That's the old-fashioned thing. Put it on your refrigerators. Put it right below the mezuzah on your door. Remember it well. Our criticisms of Israel dare not be louder than our expressions of love. May this be God's will, and to this we can all say, Amen.